Kash Patel has been in front of the media multiple times, been in front of Congress. It's about time we check up on what's going on with the FBI and Kash Patel. A lot of promises were made during the campaign. Not sure all of the campaign promises have been fulfilled, and especially I would lay at the feet of Kash Patel a failure to do most of what I had expected him to do as part of Trump's cabinet. So, what do you think, Lucas? Fill us in on what Kash Patel has been up to lately.
Kash Patel was called before Congress, before the House and the Senate last week, and um, if if you want to enjoy a soap opera of actions between the FBI, between the director of the FBI, and between senators and representatives, there were fireworks at both of those hearings. And Kash Patel, when pressed about information with regards to Jeffrey Epstein, was combative. He went on tirades against the likes of Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, several other congressmen and senators. And it was interesting. It was interesting on one hand to see him creating a cover, a very emotional cover of resistance for giving out any information with regards to Jeffrey Epstein. Some of the more adroit representatives and senators pressed him on information with regards to, or pressed him for information with regards to what the FBI knows, what they don't know, what they are talking about, what they don't talk about. So that was all very interesting. Apart from that, we have the firing of Walter Giardina, and Walter Giardina was involved in Arctic frost. We've seen the revelations of Arctic frost, but then it gets even deeper. You know, we talk a lot here about the actions of the FBI, the actions of the Pentagon. We focus a lot on the deep state in America, and it's easier to have a conversation about the deep state with regards to the agencies that we have that are engaged in foreign affairs. But when it comes to domestic affairs, we are more reticent and maybe more disbelieving at the rot that is occurring inside of our own country. And I'm thinking right now, one, about Arctic frost and some of the chilling revelations that we've seen. The chilling revelations we've seen with regards to Arctic frost. But I'm also thinking about very serious things, and with that, I'm talking about the murder of Seth Rich, and the fact that the FBI knows, or probably should know, who murdered Seth Rich, but they have not been forthcoming about that. And then if we go back a little bit further into history and we think about the relationship of the FBI to Hunter Biden's laptop and some of the cover-ups that were going there, and then we go back even a little bit further to the Comey letter, the FBI has a lot of splaining to do. And it seems that Donald Trump has been very, or is increasing the pressure that he's putting on the Department of Justice vis-a-vis tweets that he's made to Pam Bondi, public tweets that he's made to Pam Bondi, calling Pam Bondi to start to press charges, to indict some of these characters in the FBI, as well as political figures, all the way up to Barack Obama, Adam Schiff, and others who have been embroiled in the shenanigans. The shenanigans that have been going on for the last at least 10 years.
When Kash Patel appeared before Congress, we've discussed how these appearances before Congress are largely theater. What did you think of his performance before Congress? Did we learn anything, or did he just pretty much stand his ground and repeat things like most people do when they appear before Congress?
No, we learned things from the likes of Thomas Massey. I'm not sure the rep Pi. there I forget her name, where she's from. There's another rep who pressed him on information, and like very emotionally pressed him for information from the Epstein victims. What was most telling was his was Kash Patel's evasiveness whenever it came to questions like, is Donald Trump on Epstein's list? What information do you have with Donald Trump? Also, what he would not answer was, did you tell Donald Trump that he was on the list? Did Pam Bondi tell Donald Trump that he was on that list? And not only did Kash Patel not answer those questions, but he also responded with very angry tirades. And I'm talking, um, not just sullenness, not short answers. He talked over, yelled over a number of congressmen, a number of senators. He told Eric Swalwell that he was a crook. He called him a crook. He told Adam Schiff that Adam Schiff was a criminal and a traitor. Um, that's pretty incredible.
That's pretty wild. I didn't get a chance to see it. What was the reaction? Did Adam Schiff just blow it off? Did he just blow right past it, or did they make something out of that?
I mean, the wind was taken out of Adam Schiff's sails, but Adam Schiff was trying. Adam Schiff is punching down from the seat of the Senate. Um, but he both knows that the allegations that Kash Patel are alluding to, or the revelations and the facts that Kash Patel are alluding to, are very troublesome for him, and that he might be only one step ahead of indictment. So the wind was both taken out of his sails, but he continued grandstanding against Kash Patel. But Kash Patel, I don't know, but maybe one of the most maybe one of the most like emotion packed exchanges that I've heard in the Senate since it brought to mind actually the Red Scare. Who's the Red Scare guy from Wisconsin? Anyways, have the "have you no decency" comment made by the Secretary of the Army back in the 50s, that sort of brought down that whole charade. Anyway, enough of that. Go watch that. We should put clips of those in. But I think what's more important is one, that the FBI, or that Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, they campaigned on a narrative about Senator Joe McCarthy. They campaigned on the exposure of this information, and Kash Patel was also very duplicitous in his responses, because he kept detailing a litany of other sexual predator and crime statistics, that what the FBI was embarked on, but it wasn't going to this very important case. And so he was dusting up, he was dusting up a screen, so that whenever he was asked about, Jeffrey Epstein have any of the Johns been prosecuted? What are any cases being built against any of the Johns? What's going on there? And his response would be, well, we're arresting all these other sexual predators. That's a total evasion. And then when pressed specifically for information with regards to Trump and Epstein, he was even more evasive, and also responded with emotional tirades to draw the attention away from the previous question. So something's up.
I mean, do you think there's an insight there? Like, what's going on? Is there something that they're trying to hold back, or is he trying to protect the president? Do you have any sense of really what's going on with Epstein? I mean, certainly out in the public, this has not been forgotten, and it is constantly being recirculated, rebrought up by the general populace and on social media. it seems like the Epstein thing is not going away, but at the same time, I'm not sure we've heard the vote come from Massey. Did any of that come up, or do we know where that's going?
You know, the Massey and Ro Khanna do have the 218 votes. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. Marjorie Taylor Greene has also said she's going to read the names, but I think maybe we don't do ourselves a great service in focusing solely on what's going with the Epstein files. I think what we need to be asking is what's happening more deeply in the FBI. And when I mentioned Arctic Frost, you know, Arctic Frost goes back to revelations of a operation that was conducted by the Department of Justice and the FBI in gathering and channeling um, the FBI and the Department of Justice to make prosecutions against Donald Trump. And this was coming after Russiagate. And so when we begin to understand that FBI agents like Walter Giardina and other FBI agents, that there was a specific targeting of Donald Trump um, during his first term and then during the Biden administration, and targeting of the likes of Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon, and other members of very politically motivated attacks against members of the Trump administration. You know, that's a deeper scandal. And then if we even go back, before Arctic Frost and before that coordinated attack on Donald Trump, we go back to Russiagate and begin to understand that the FBI was looking the other way and not doing its due diligence in investigating what happened at the DNC, and not only that, but that not just what happened at the DNC, but what happened with the murder of Seth Rich. And we dig into some of those details, that they collected Seth Rich's laptops and then claimed that they didn't have it, that they had lost it, that they didn't know anything about what, why are people asking us about Seth Rich's laptop? We don't even have it. And it turns out that they do have that laptop. It was their narrative that Seth Rich was killed in a robbery. That story doesn't hold water. And then whenever we begin to understand that the DNC emails that implicated Hillary Clinton as stealing the Democratic nomination back in the 2016 election from Bernie Sanders, and that Seth Rich was a likely candidate for leaking the DNC and that not being hacked. When we think about our relationship with Russia today, the FBI the FBI has backed itself into a very dark corner. There's also actions by the FBI.
With the FBI being backed into a dark corner, is this what you see Kash Patel, where his focus is primarily, is trying to sort that out or to undo that or fix that?
I know that Kash Patel, or I believe that Kash Patel is righteous in his indignation as to the actions of the FBI and the DOJ. But I think also we have to begin to question the actions of the DOJ and what the Department of Justice is getting away with. And I say that too because, when the director of the NSA went to the director of national intelligence to tell him that he was being lied to by the CIA and by the FBI with regards to the Russiagate hack, and the NSA is in the business of knowing what the network security is going on, what information is being transmitted across the internet. And the director of the NSA knew that the timestamps of the information that was released to WikiLeaks did not match up with a hack over the internet. It was too the timestamps were too quick, and so all of that information had to actually have been passed over physically and likely through a USB thumb drive. So when the NSA director went to now I can't think of his name, not Mike Huckabee from Kansas, but the director at the time, um, it'll come to me later. When he went to him and said this information is wrong, you're being lied to by the CIA and the FBI. Um, the director of national intelligence asked the director of the NSA, "What sort of relationship do you have with the FBI?" And the director of the NSA responded, "Well, they raided my house a couple of weeks ago. I forget how long ago. They raided my house." That was his relationship. And the reason that the FBI had raided his house was because there had been a whistleblower um, on the FBI. And the FBI's response to that whistleblower had been to go around and to pick other likely or other people who were in a position of power who knew what was going on and to threaten them by staging raids of their houses. And like we have this idea in our minds that to achieve a certain level of power and authority in the federal government is to give someone like immunity, like that they respond, that they can get things done. I think that Cash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi have found that that there are networks of people that exist inside the FBI and the CIA. But here the FBI and maybe the DOJ, maybe this extends to lawyers and judges. We don't know. We're not getting a deep glimpse into what's happening there. But we do know that the FBI has a history of threatening both politicians and other bureaucrats whenever they're working against the FBI. And we know that Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and Chuck Grassley and others have exposed information that is incredibly damning to the FBI. And that information has been picked up by absolutely no media sources whatsoever. And so what we're seeing here, or what we can imagine, is some sort of waiting game, or some sort of power struggle that's going on inside the halls of government, in the FBI, in the CIA, in which those people who are still trying to cover their tracks are doubling down on their tactics. And until we see this information break, you know, I should say, until we see the media picking this up and the American people beginning to understand what's happening, it doesn't look good for Kash Patel.
The picture that you paint sure sounds like, even if you're at the top in the FBI, that you don't necessarily have a lot of power, and that a lot of the power is at the lower levels within the organization itself. Is that how you see it? Is that sort of what we're starting to learn about how the FBI actually operates?
I think if we turn and think about, if we go back to, um, if we go back to no, I don't think that it's at the base of the FBI. I think those are, the stormtroopers. I think the problem that we have here is that there's a network of both bureaucrats and politicians, um, who do not have any allegiance to the administration, the current administration, whoever that may be, or to the American people, or to their public. And their allegiances are to um, thoughts like American primacy, and especially to money that is paid into the lobbies that they support. So whenever I think about why when I think about Ukraine, back in 2014, going back to Obama's years, and Trump won, and we learn things like Mitt Romney's protege, Culver Black, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, were on a board of a very important gas company in the Ukraine, and the United States was working covertly at a very deep level inside of Ukraine. You have to ask yourself, like, why Mitt Romney and why Joe Biden? And then you turn around and you find out, oh, there is a Senate Intelligence Committee that is groomed by the Pentagon, that has an immense amount of power. Um, the the federal government, all the agencies and the politicians alike benefit from a mask of secrecy, a veil of secrecy that they throw over their actions. And whenever questioned about what they're up to, they say, well, this is too secret, this is too vital to American security, so you can't know what's going on here. And then you start beginning to subpoena and pierce the redaction of all of that secrecy, and you find out, the majority of warrants that go to, or the majority of FFA, or sorry, FBI pleas that go to the FISA court for surveillance and tapping on American citizens are incorrect. They've been manipulated. The FBI agents are lying. The FISA court officers, judges are going along with it. They're feigning surprise. But whenever you have that amount of error, of lies going on, this is a deeper problem. But I think if we do turn to the Senate, we begin to think about the Senate Intelligence Committee, the relationship between the very expansive, we say intelligence, we covert, these is a complex network that works with the State Department. The State Department extends beyond any one administration. We can begin to sort of understand where the actual power base lies in Washington right now.
And the power base lies within this sort of shadowy under network that isn't as visible to the public as somebody like Kash Patel.
Yeah, and I think when we really get down to it, the power base lies in pumping up fear. So whenever we hear politicians turn from, we may roll our eyes when we hear politicians talking about job creation and commerce and some of these feel-good notions, but we should be even more concerned whenever they say, oh, there are threats. There are threats that threaten America. It's too dire for us to be able to share the actual information about that. But trust us, you need us. Trust us. You need to give us more power to protect you. We experienced the shift of the Overton window in the wake of the Patriot Act. And I'm talking about with what was permissible, that this was what established the FISA courts and made it permissible to spy on Americans. The revelations of Edward Snowden, those revelations again went through WikiLeaks, and look how hard the United States government worked to imprison Julian Assange. They found some patsies, some Swedish women to act as patsies to feign rape allegations so that they could drag Julian Assange into court. And it was only countries that dared fight against the United States, like Venezuela and Ecuador, that did not play in that ball game. But even they were limited in their power, only to keep or were able to protect Julian Assange by keeping them in their embassies. But that's pretty incredible when we think about like our notions of American values like liberty and freedom, for us to turn a blind eye whenever the American government turns on an Australian citizen, treats him like a terrorist, treats him like an American citizen that they can drag into court, and that they can fabricate charges against him. And then
that dragging people into court is something we've seen even within the crypto industry. I mean, people who are certainly not U.S. citizens, probably shouldn't be subject to U.S. jurisdiction, getting dragged into U.S. courts or even submitting to it.
Sure, it happens. It happens so rampantly now that we don't even think about it. But I also begin to worry a little bit about the Trump administration's use of the military and turning the military within our borders, and also the the attacks that have, like, what is it now? 3 attacks that have been made on various boats in international waters north of Venezuela. I think back to the Obama administration, to Eric Holder's line when questioned about the Obama administration turning to the use of drones. And when they were questioned, when the Obama administration was questioned about whether that was lawful, um, because it was not giving the targets of those drone strikes due process. Oh, you're labeling somebody a terrorist and you're turning around and killing them. Where's the due process? They said, oh, well, there was a conversation at the bureaucratic level. We had it wasn't just one person who decided to go out and kill an American citizen, or to kill some citizen of another country that we had labeled a terrorist. There was a bureaucratic process, and that's sufficient for due process. This is what's happening in America today, and so we're taking
The loss of due process. I mean, we're seeing that with ICE as well. It's not like these deportations are happening with due process either. It's just immediate.
well, and specifically, whatever process it is, the the thing that set America apart was that it was open, that it was open for the public, for us to see. We see ICE agents that cover their face now. The FBI gets to operate in secret courts outside of the eye of the United States. The CIA got away with that for many years. They were operating foreignly, but all of a sudden that secrecy moved into the United States. I think back to the wise men of FDR's cabinet and then Truman's cabinet in the wake of World War II. Their concerns about the USSR, the Soviet republics, was not that they were communist, as we all believe today. It was that they had secret police. And when I think about and look at their shock of the tactics, not just of the secret police, but also of the covert operations. One of the Walter Stimson, the Secretary of the Army, when the likes of Alan Dulles and some of these idiots said, "Oh, the United States needs to be spying and lying on a level of Britain and the USSR in order to compete in the world today as we emerge onto the world stage," there were men of honor who said, "Gentlemen don't read others' mail," and that level of respectability and honesty has been eviscerated from our government, and to a point where we don't even think about it. And we have secret police. And nobody bats an eye in America today. This is a problem. So that's to bring it back to Kash Patel. I think that's what Kash Patel and Donald Trump are up against. I don't think it's just about the Epstein files.
It's about the development of the secret police that exists within America, and it's very difficult for any of these individuals who are in power to do anything about it.
Yes, and there are those who might question my the lack of my fervor with regards to the Epstein case, but I want to know what's going on here, because I do see on a broader level that Donald Trump was wronged by this secret structure that exists inside of our government. He's trying to do something about it, but when I look at what's going on, and then I see all of a sudden a great amount of concern from a whole wide range of bureaucrats and politicians both, I say, wait a second, they weren't concerned about this before. What has changed? And then when I also begin to look at the complexity.
Well, what has changed is their understanding of it. That was it too naive? I mean, Trump was president before.
No, what has changed are the attacks that Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard are making on the FBI and the CIA, on the deep state.
It's a different tactic than what they did in the last time around.
Wait a second. What do you mean different tactic than?
Well, I mean, in Trump's first administration, they talked a lot about draining the swamp and doing things different. I mean, we heard a ton of promises from Donald Trump, and he sort of floundered in his first administration to accomplish much of any of that. It seemed like when people started really looking into the cabinet he put together, the people that he surrounded himself with, they were swamp creatures. They were just like beltway DC insiders, and that he hadn't successfully done any of those things. So when I say taking a different approach, I mean this administration was a unity administration with Democrats and people who really, in some ways, people would say ought not to have been a part of a Republican administration, but Donald Trump brought them together. So that's what I mean by a different approach and a different tactic.
Absolutely. And I think Donald Trump learned in his first administration that trying to tell the truth and to be open about things was we're giving weapons to the secretive enemies to turn around and hang him. And so I think that's why he's been more a creature of action, a little bit more also avert in his appeals to the American people through his Truth Social posts. But yes, he's been very different. I'm also struck by the when you say a unity cabinet, I'm struck by the allegiance that his cabinet members, the likes of Kash Patel, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. I'm surprised at how closely aligned they have been to Donald Trump. But there's still something. What I was going to say earlier is, we just saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I literally saw it. We saw an assassination attempt at Donald Trump earlier this year in Butler, Pennsylvania. The actions of the FBI in gathering the evidence about those things that occurred have been less sound than I would have expected. When the murder side of Charlie Kirk is already being ripped up and carted away, when the bullet is not immediately found, when there are inconsistencies with the information that we're getting out about the alleged suspect, when there is absolutely no information that has been released with regards to the alleged suspect of the assassination attempt of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And then when I hold that up to the stonewalling that goes up around the information around the likes of Seth Rich, I see a pattern here. And with the timing of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and his status and his actions on behalf of the Republican Party, that was the first campus tour stop on essentially a Republican recruiting drive for voters going into the midterm elections. And I think there must, to me, and I don't mean to be blackpilling everyone or you guys, but I think that there is a very deep and dark war that's going on in the halls of power in our country right now. And that the Trump administration just lost a general, and that they are making recalculations right now because they're saying, we might lose more seats to Democrats coming in the upcoming election. And what are those Democrats going to be told? They're very myopic in their concerns. They believe the propaganda of all the bad things that they've heard about Donald Trump and the Donald Trump administration. How is that going to be used against us coming up? And what can we accomplish in the shortened window that we now have, or the shortened runway that we have, with an eye on the upcoming elections? I think that's what's going on.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see how the midterms shake out. There's a lot of momentum on the Democratic side of things. We'll have to see if it plays out the way that the Republicans had hoped. I feel like the traditional thing that happens is whichever party is in power loses during the midterms, and we start to see a more balanced approach to government in that second half of the first phase. So I would expect nothing less, just based on historical. perspectives.
I've very, very true. But I've also been so very interested in Donald Trump's narrative of fair trade versus free trade. And I've wondered if Democrats would begin to pick up on that and to think about how fair trade is much more in alignment with their, the basis of their support and their true concern, which is supporting the American worker. And I've wondered if there would be a movement that picks up in the Democratic Party. I also look at the Democratic and the Republican parties in the United States, and I think that there is a very distinct difference between the powers of the state and the federal government, and there's more room for Democrats to be focusing on the state governments. This is why I'm so excited to see what Gavin Newsom is up to in the state of California. But at the national level, if the Democrats were also began to pick up on the fair trade versus free trade understanding of America's role in the world and in a quote unquote global economy, I think that the Donald Trump that picked up a lot of Democrats, Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy, of high profile Democrats in his first campaign, they could find a lot of shared cause and shared policies with the Democrats in this upcoming election. But right now, it looks to me that any chance of that is being snuffed out. And being snuffed out by deep, dark, secretive forces. So that's all I got. We're closing in on 40 minutes. I don't know if you have any questions or if I said anything that was obscure that do you wanted clarification on.
We're at time. I thought it was a fantastic discussion about what's going on in the FBI. I think there have been a lot of questions that people have had about how Kash Patel is proceeding, and I think the discussion and some of your ideas hit home. So we'll see you next time on FOMO.